Welcome to the deep dive. We're diving deep today, into one of the biggest financial scandals ever.
The Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme.
Madoff. For years, he had everyone fooled. Everyone was just amazed by these consistent returns he was pulling in.
But there were signs. There are always signs.
Oh yeah, in hindsight, it seems so obvious, right? But our goal today is to really understand, how did he pull it off, and why did it take so long for anyone to notice? What did people miss?
Right, and to do that, we're going to be looking closely at the work of Harry Markopolos.
This guy, he's our guide through all this, right?
He spent years investigating Madoff, trying to expose the truth.
Along with a few others who joined him. Often they were met with, like, total disbelief. Nobody wanted to believe Madoff was a fraud.
It's a fascinating story.
Okay, so let's rewind back to, like, 1999, 2000, the very beginning.
Yeah.
What's really interesting is that the first sign that something was off wasn't some fancy algorithm or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was a simple question about profits. Steady, unusually steady profits.
Right. It started with Frank Casey. He was one of the early investigators. He noticed that a fund manager was claiming these crazy, consistent monthly returns.
Like, what kind of returns?
Like 1 to 2% net a month after month.
Every single month.
Pretty much. And in the market, things go up and down. You don't see that kind of consistency. It's just not normal. That's what made Frank suspicious.
Yeah, that would raise an eyebrow for sure. But it wasn't just the steadiness of the returns, right?
No, it was how those returns were supposedly being made. Madoff, he said he was using this strategy called a split strike conversion, and it was all tied to the S&P 100.
Okay, so he's basically saying he's mirroring the S&P 100.
In a way, he claimed he was buying like 35 stocks that mimicked the S&P, and then he was using options to control his gains and losses.
Options. So that's like contracts, right?
Exactly. But here's the thing. Markopolos, when he looked at this strategy, the math just didn't add up. For Madoff to be getting those consistent returns, all 35 of those stocks would have to go up or at least stay flat every single month.
I mean, that's just not realistic.
It's highly unlikely, almost impossible.
So that was red flag number one.
Yep. The math behind his strategy was flawed from the start.
Okay, so flawed strategy. What else did they find?
The second big red flag was the options market itself. Madoff was saying he was doing all this hedging with options, but to do that, to hedge the way he claimed he would have needed a massive amount of these very specific S&P 100 options.
Oh, so he's saying he's buying up huge amounts of options.
Exactly. These are called OEX options. And when Markopolos and his team looked into it, they realized the market just wasn't big enough. There weren't enough OEX options available for him to be doing what he said he was doing. It was like he was claiming to have bought all the oranges in the well, but there weren't that many oranges to begin with.
Okay, so his story's falling apart. Flawed strategy, not enough options. This is getting good. What else?
So then they look at his performance charts, right? And this is where it gets even crazier. His returns, they were basically a straight line upwards.
Like a perfect 45-degree angle.
Yeah, basically. And that's just not how the market worked. There were always ups and downs, volatility. But Madoff's chart, it was like he'd somehow ironed out all the bumps.
Too perfect, too smooth.
Way too perfect. That became red flag number 3.
That's a big one. So we've got the bad math, the missing options, and the impossibly perfect chart. What else did they find?
The fourth red flag was the most basic question: where was the money coming from? If it wasn't from market performance and it wasn't from his options trading, then where was it coming from?
Right, he had to be getting the money from somewhere.
His reports didn't explain it. It was a complete mystery.
So, like a black box, basically. Money going in, money coming out, but nobody knows what's happening inside.
Exactly. And then they started comparing Madoff's supposed returns to their own returns at Rampart.
Remind me, Rampart was the firm where Markopolos worked, right?
Yeah. They managed portfolios, and some of their strategies actually used options, too. So they were able to compare apples to apples. And the difference was huge.
Like how huge?
Well, for example, during the Russian debt crisis back in '98, the market tanked, right? But Madoff, he still reported a positive return. Same thing in 2000, another market drop, and Madoff's still making money.
While everyone else is losing their shirts.
Exactly. Rampart's portfolios, using similar strategies, they couldn't replicate that. It just wasn't possible.
So red flag number 5, he was somehow immune to market crashes?
Yeah. And then there was the number of down months.
Down months, meaning months where he lost money.
Right. Over an 87-month period, the market went down 26 times. But Madoff, he only reported 3 losing months. And even those were tiny losses.
So basically, he was winning almost all the time.
Pretty much. And that just didn't make sense given the limited number of options available for hedging. It was red flag number 6.
Okay, 6 major red flags. So what did Markopolos do with all of this? He had to have gone to the authorities, right?
Oh, he did. In the year 2000, he sent a detailed report to the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. He laid out all 6 red flags, everything. It was all right there in the report.
And he sent this to their Boston office.
Right, to a guy named Grant Ward.
And what happened?
Nothing. The SEC, they didn't do anything, at least not anything effective. They just didn't act. It's unbelievable, really.
Wow. So even with all those red flags, nobody took him seriously.
No, and the thing is, it only got worse from there. Madoff's scheme, it just kept growing.
This is crazy. But okay, so it's 2001 to 2008 now. What happens next?
Well, this is where a guy named Michael Okrent enters the picture.
Okrent.
Yeah, he was the editor of this magazine, Hedge. It was all about hedge funds. And I remember Frank Casey, the guy who noticed the weird returns?
Yeah.
Well, he had this bet with Okrent. He challenged him to name a hedge fund manager who was managing more money than anyone else, someone Okrent probably hadn't even heard of.
And that manager was?
Madoff.
No way.
Yeah, so Okrent, he starts looking into Madoff, and he's blown away by these returns, these super consistent returns, no volatility. And he's like, this doesn't make sense.
So he wrote about it in Hedge.
He did. He published this big article outlining a lot of the same concerns that Markopolos had already sent to the SEC.
So more public attention on Madoff, but still nothing from the authorities.
Right. And then, not long after, Barron's, the financial newspaper, they published an article too. Erin Arvdland was the reporter.
I've heard of her.
She basically echoed a lot of what Okrent had already written, but she did something important. She actually interviewed Madoff.
What did he say?
He denied everything, said any suggestion of wrongdoing was ridiculous.
Of course he did.
But the Barron's article, it also pointed out something interesting. It talked about how Madoff's investors, they were all happy, even though they didn't really understand his methods.
So they were just trusting him blindly.
Pretty much. One investor even said Madoff told him that he often moved all his investments into cash when the market got volatile.
Which would explain why his returns were always so smooth.
Exactly.
Okay, so now you've got these articles raising questions, but Madoff's still raking in the cash. It's incredible.
Yeah, and it's not just any cash. He was pulling in huge money from Europe, from wealthy families, even royalty. There's a story about Prince Michel of Yugoslavia trying to get Prince Charles to invest.
Wow. So this is a global operation at this point.
Oh, yeah. And for Markopolos, this was more proof that it was a Ponzi scheme. A real hedge fund, even one doing something illegal, wouldn't need that constant flood of new money.
It's the new money that keeps a Ponzi scheme going, right?
Exactly. You need new investors to pay off the old ones.
So the pieces are all falling into place for Markopolos, but he still can't get anyone to listen. What did he do next?
He tried going around the SEC. He sent an anonymous tip to Elliot Spitzer.
Spitzer, the New York Attorney General.
Yeah, Spitzer had this reputation for going after Wall Street. Markopolos was hoping he'd investigate, but nothing happened.
This is unbelievable. So many warnings, and still nothing. It must have been incredibly frustrating for Markopolos.
Oh, it was. And it was getting dangerous, too. He was really worried about his safety, his family's safety. Billions of dollars were at stake, and there were rumors that some of Madoff's money might be tied to, well, to dangerous people.
Yeah, you don't mess with that kind of money.
Markopolos started taking precautions. He'd check his car for bombs. He'd sleep with a gun. He was living in fear.
Wow. But then in 2005, he met someone at the SEC who finally seemed to get it, right?
Yes, a guy named Mike Garrity. He worked in the Boston office. Garrity, he was different. He was curious. He wanted to understand the details, the math. He actually listened.
And he understood the math.
He did. Markopolos spent hours with him, explaining everything, showing him charts and graphs. And Garrity, he got it. He saw how impossible Madoff's returns were.
So finally some hope.
Well, Garrity said he'd open an investigation, and he also referred the case to the New York office. He knew it was too big for just the Boston branch.
Okay, so it's now in the hands of the New York SEC. This has to be it, right? They have to do something now.
You'd think so, but no. The New York office, they didn't do anything either. Markopolos even sent them another report in 2005, even more detailed than the first one. But incredibly, it got sent to the wrong email address.
Are you kidding?
It's true, just a simple mistake, but it had huge consequences.
So they missed their chance. Again.
They did. And Markopolos, he felt like he was screaming into the void, like nobody was listening. He later said he felt like the boy who cried wolf.
Wow. Years of warnings, solid evidence, and it all just went nowhere.
Hard to believe.
And then finally the whole thing blows up.
December 2008, Madoff confesses to his sons. He's arrested. The news hits everyone like a ton of bricks.
What was Markopolos' reaction?
Relief. He was just relieved that it was finally over. Relieved for his family. and then just exhausted, drained. It had been years of stress, years of fighting, and it was finally done.
I can't even imagine.
And then, the whole world starts to understand just how big this was. David Einhorn, the investor, he publicly acknowledged how important Markopolos' work had been.
Finally, some recognition.
Yeah. And when Markopolos testified before Congress, he really let the SEC have it. He said, the SEC roars like a mouse and bites like a flea.
Ouch.
But he was right. The impact of this fraud was massive. Thousands of people, families, institutions, they lost everything, and it could have been prevented.
So what happened next?
The SEC, they obviously had to do something, so they launched an investigation led by their Inspector General, David Kotz.
Did they find anything?
They did. They found that there had been other warnings about Madoff, other red flags that the SEC had ignored. And remember Grant Ward, the guy who got that first report back in 2000? Well, he initially said he didn't remember ever meeting Markopolos, but then his own colleague contradicted him. Turns out they did meet.
So he lied?
It seems that way. The investigation also revealed more about how Madoff had targeted specific communities, especially the Jewish community in New York and Florida.
Right, that's what they call an affinity scheme, right? Exploiting trust within a community.
Exactly.
And did the SEC actually make any changes after all this?
They did. Mary Shapiro, she became the new SEC chair, and she implemented some reforms, more training for examiners, more oversight, whistleblower incentive.
Sounds like a step in the right direction.
It was, but the SEC report, it came out really late, and it showed just how many warnings they'd ignored. It's crazy.
It's like they just didn't want to see it.
It's hard to explain. There's even a story about this executive. He almost figured it out just by chance.
How?
He overheard Madoff's sons talking in an elevator. They were bragging about how well they were doing, even though the market was down. The executive thought it was suspicious and decided not to invest.
So close.
I know, but Markopolos, he kept pushing for more reform. He said the SEC needed to hire people with real experience, people who understood how the markets worked. And he wanted them to be more proactive, to go after fraud instead of waiting for it to happen.
It makes sense.
He also wanted better whistleblower protections. He knew how dangerous it could be to speak out.
Yeah, he knew firsthand.
He did, and even after Madoff went to prison, Markopolos and his team, they kept investigating other cases.
So it wasn't just Madoff, there were other frauds out there.
Oh, yeah. The Madoff case, it was just the tip of the iceberg.
This is a whole other deep dive we could do sometime.
Definitely. But the Madoff scandals, it did have a tragic side, too. Remember René Thierry de la Villechaize?
No.
He was a European investor who lost a lot of money with Madoff. He ended up taking his own life.
Oh, that's terrible.
It really affected Markopolos. He considered de la Villechaize a friend. It showed him the human cost of all of this.
It's a reminder that these financial scandals, they're not just numbers on a page. Real people get hurt.
Exactly. And in the end, Markopolos, he called himself a $50 billion failure.
Why?
Because he felt like he could have saved more people, more money. But even though he exposed Madoff, it was still too late for so many.
That's a heavy burden to carry.
It is, but he never stopped fighting. He wanted to make sure the SEC did its job to protect investors and prevent another Madoff from happening.
So for our listeners out there, what's the big takeaway from all of this?
The Madoff scandal wasn't some freak accident. It was years in the making. There were warnings, there were red flags, but they were ignored.
Because the SEC messed up?
Partly. But it's also about critical thinking, about questioning things that seem too good to be true. Even when it comes to complex financial stuff, the answers are often right there in front of you.
You just have to know how to look.
Exactly.
And that's what this deep dive is all about, right? Helping people understand these complex topics so they can make better decisions.
Absolutely. So here's a final question for everyone listening. Do you think the financial system is safer today, after all the reforms and everything?
Or could another Madoff happen?
That's the question. Be skeptical, be curious, and always ask why.
Great advice. And that's it for the deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.